Well, welcome everybody. We're glad to see you coming out tonight and joining us. We're excited to be talking with you tonight about living well with ADHD at all ages and stages of life. A couple of little housekeeping announcements before I introduce our first guest speakers. If there are restrooms out to the left of the door once you get out the door here, so feel free to utilize those when needed. There is plenty of food, so if you are hungry after and want a second round, please, nobody here will judge you. We'll all be envious of you maybe. And then we are, when we do our presentation, toward the end of the presentation, we're going to be doing a demonstration of neurofeedback. And in order to do that, we need a brain to hook up to. And so we always look for a volunteer or somebody who is volunteering somebody. So is there anybody in here who's interested in just being our volunteer? Okay. Oh, we've got two. You two can fight about it. We'll let you know when it's time for you to come over, and you'll sit over here by Adam, and he'll put a cap on you, and we'll all get to see your beautiful brain, okay? So we're going to start tonight with our guest speakers. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. Robin Nordmeyer, CLC, is a professional certified ADHD coach with over 15 years of training and experience supporting individuals and couples in navigating ADHD. A former CHADD parent-to-parent trainer and a corporate leader with Procter & Gamble, she blends professional expertise with lived experience, raising 4 neurodivergent children alongside her neurotypical husband of 37 years. Robin specializes in helping adults manage demanding careers, improve relationships, and build resilience, all with a warm, encouraging approach that inspires clarity, balance, and hope. Her mission is simple: to help people with ADHD stop struggling in silence and start living with more clarity, balance, and hope for both the present and the future. Alicia Coles has had a lifetime journey with ADHD and understands firsthand that the many challenges it brings. With over a decade of experience as a professional certified ADHD coach, consultant, and educator, Alicia specializes in supporting neurodivergent individuals through strength-based, research-informed strategies. She draws on her expertise in brain development, executive functioning, effective learning modalities, and wellness to empower parents, youth, young adults, and educators to better understand and support ADHD brains. Having navigated her own ADHD journey as a child, adult, and parent, Alicia brings both professional insight and lived experience to her work, blending neuroscience, education, and practical tools to foster self-acceptance, resilience, and growth. Help me welcome Robin and Alicia.
Perfect. Welcome, and thank you for the lovely introduction. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. It's a pleasure to have all of you in the room on a Tuesday evening. Thank you for coming and being part of this talk. Just real quick, how many people in the room are a family member who's supporting someone with ADHD? Can we see? Awesome. How many have ADHD themselves, if you're willing to share? Quite a few. And how many are in the professional field helping others with ADHD? Love it. Yeah. Thank you. Well, this is Living Well with ADHD, all ages and stages. I'm Robin Nordmeyer. Thank you for the lovely introduction. My journey started many years ago when my first daughter was diagnosed, then followed by my oldest son being diagnosed, and embarking on this journey as a parent of children with ADHD. And as that parent, wanting to do everything I could to really understand their experience, to help them through this. And there wasn't a whole lot out there at that time. So it was really a challenging struggle. And they, ended up being on medication. One day, a pivotal point for me is when my daughter, who was on medication, turned and looked at me and said, Mom, without this pill, I'm nothing. I can't do anything. And it broke my heart, just broke my heart. And it's not that medication was not effective, but what I knew is it was a very powerful tool, but it wasn't the whole story. It really wasn't the whole story, and I needed to really dive in to find the way forward for our kids. Fast forward, I got involved with CHADD, as was mentioned, became a parent-to-parent trainer, really loved learning everything I learned and helping other parents learn the same, and found it made a big deal. And then fast forward again, left my corporate career to become a full-time life coach and then ADHD coach. 16 years later, here I am today, waking up every morning very passionate about the difference coaching makes, along with all the other multimodal approaches for managing ADHD.
Welcome. I'm Alicia Coles. I also have a journey of having ADHD myself and navigating that through life. So I was the child that had really big emotions. I was the over-perfectionist teen trying to overcompensate. I was the busy brain adult and attempting to cope with my ADHD without knowing. It wasn't until graduate school that I was finally diagnosed. And that moment really gave me clarity to notice that something wasn't wrong with me. It was just that my brain worked differently. And that was a really pivotal hope to help me learn how to better manage these symptoms that came. And so over the years, I learned to use a variety of approaches to help me manage and cope with the unorganized thoughts in my brain and being able to manage all the things that life brings in a better, healthier way. And so with that personal journey and combined with my work, supporting neurodivergent children and coaching educators, as my background starts as being a teacher, and navigating through that, finding this love of coaching, and then realizing that there's ADHD coaching, where I can really further support these kids that have ADHD, these parents and these families, as well as young adults. That's what led me to my career in ADHD coaching. So I specialize in helping others really understand and work with their unique brain wiring and not working against them. And so with that, I especially work with parents of young children, youth, and young adults.
So this evening, our learning objectives are to recognize ADHD across the different life stages. So it was once believed we grew out of ADHD, but what happens is it gets manifest differently as we age, from the young child all the way through even senior adults, right? To learn the fundamentals about executive function, which many of you may already know quite a bit about, and to talk about the multimodal approach to support and the journey ahead. And we're also going to talk about ADHD coaching and what it is that Alicia and I do, so you can get a sense of how ADHD coaching is unique in respect to everything that's available in a multimodal approach to the care of individuals with ADHD, and how it can make a difference as part of a client's support team. We want you to leave with a message of hope and a reframe for success. If you're here feeling like this is so overwhelming, or this is something that is just going to be very difficult throughout your life, that's not the case. That's not the story. there is a wonderful way to move forward here. If you have questions, and there will be time for Q&A, so if you have particular questions about coaching, we encourage you to write them down and save them, and Alicia and I would be glad to answer anything that comes up, whether it's specific to being someone with ADHD, taking care of someone with ADHD, or what ADHD coaching is more about. So this really is this you? I'm sorry. Okay.
So one thing I really want people to know is that ADHD is a neurobiological condition. So that's where your brain has unique brain wiring. So I want to emphasize that this is not a character flaw, although a lot of hurtful assumptions can be played out with the stigma of having ADHD. Some painful ones are lazy, flighty, stupid, not caring enough, or you just need to try harder. But really, having ADHD really makes it a lot harder to access the thinking skills needed to organize your thoughts, to get started on a task, to be able to break big tasks into smaller steps, manage emotions, and so much more. And so most people with ADHD actually have to work so much harder to access these skills than people with ADHD. And when a person with ADHD is supported well and they're able to learn how to work with their brain, it can really help people with ADHD soar and really utilize their brilliance and unique creativity. So ADHD looks different at every age, but it's always real, and everyone has their unique presentation of ADHD. And signs of ADHD can show up as early as 3 to 4 years old, and some of us may know may not even be recognized until later in life. So some of the ways it may show up may be the young child who couldn't sit still or has a hard time managing really big emotions, leading to frustrated meltdowns. It could be the child or teen who has incomplete assignments or completes the assignments but forgets to turn them in. It could be the college student who's overwhelmed by independence and doesn't even know where to start. It could be the parent who has their own ADHD-related challenges, resulting in difficulty in being consistent, managing power struggles with their children, staying on top of all the tasks that life brings, which can play out in navigating home life, career, relationship, and parenting. It could be the couple who struggles with communication, emotional regulation, and balancing the dynamics of their relationship. The adult who's struggling in the workplace, or has difficulty keeping a job, or the opposite, one who has risen to the top as an entrepreneur, a CEO, or executive, but has reached a tipping point that can wreak havoc in the career. This can be also adults who are diagnosed later in life who need to find a better grasp on how to navigate this new diagnosis for the first time. It can be the retiree or senior who needs to rebuild a new structure to optimize their new life experience with all these transitions. So one thing we want you to know is, and understand, is that this shifts from one stage to the next, and knowing this can help us support growth, not just the symptoms. So the way moving forward is really unique for each individual and can be very different. ADHD coaching, like everybody too, is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It takes all of this into account, like the pieces of the puzzle where the coach and the client partner together on this journey. So the ADHD diagnosis requires a formal, comprehensive evaluation. It's not just a quick quiz that you can take online. It involves clinical interviews, history gathering, and often neuropsychological testing. Many traits are context dependent and can be masked or misinterpreted. We don't diagnose as ADHD coaches, but we do often review the assessments to help support our clients' goals. Understanding this full picture really helps moves us from labels to meaning support and how to reach those goals that they're wanting to meet. So when it's all in the family, I don't know if any of you relate to the story I'm going to tell, but I can relate to what all of this really looks like in a family setting. So I grew up in a family of 4. It was my mom, my dad, my brother, and myself. 3 out of the 4 of us had undiagnosed ADHD living in a household, which meant our house was full of misplaced shoes, lost homework, and a lot of, wait, where did I put that? Where did you put that? And so whenever my parents asked, who did this? Or where did you put that? My brother and I's response was always, not me. I didn't do it. It was not me. In retrospect, most of the time we weren't trying to dodge responsibility. We really couldn't remember, one, who did it, and if we moved it, and where it went, due to working memory challenges that were unknown. And so this happened so often that my mom actually decided to name the culprit. So she created a little imaginary elf called Not Me, who was apparently responsible for every missing object and this mysterious mess. So it became this piece of, well, who did that? Oh, I guess Not Me did it. He's running around, putting things everywhere else. And honestly, he was one of the busiest members in our household.
And so that's a great example of how there is quite a hereditary component to ADHD. And so if one person has ADHD in the family, you probably don't have to look too far within that family dynamic or the extended family somewhere along the line to see someone else with similar traits or someone else who's also been diagnosed. But one thing here that we really want to point out is that helping someone with ADHD goes beyond the individual with ADHD. For example, Alicia works a lot with parents and families, and it's so important when you're coaching a child with ADHD that you're also working with the parent to really understand what's going on, that understanding and awareness that's huge for navigating it effectively in your life, and how to best support the child in the coaching process in between sessions and such, right? And you can get into situations where coaching is great, and then if it's not reinforced in that family dynamic, then the coaching isn't as effective. So very important to bring them along. I coach a lot of couples with ADHD, and I've coached a lot of adults with ADHD where it has had an impact on their relationship, you know, as well as other areas in their life. And what I really find is it takes 2. Done a lot of research in this area. It takes 2 for that dynamic that's going on to really move forward and overcome some of the challenges related to that relationship, right? It's also important that educators are coming along in the journey and that there's a lot more communication along that multimodal approach to supporting someone with ADHD. So we're going to move on to the ADHD iceberg. How many know of this one? Is this familiar to anyone? So Chris Ziegler-Dendy, many, many, many decades ago, was someone who had a child with ADHD. And she has pioneered the metaphor, and you can actually get this on the internet, the ADHD iceberg, and download her poster by typing in her name in ADHD iceberg, and you can get your own copy of this. I didn't bring one for each of you, but the iceberg is a great way to really understand ADHD and really get the bigger picture. So in an iceberg, what we know is about 1/8 of what you see on the surface is the tip of the iceberg, but below the waterline is this huge structure, right? Maybe up to 7/8 of the structure that's really supporting everything you see on the surface. And it's a great way to talk about ADHD because what we see on the surface tends to be hyperactivity, impulsivity, right? Inattention, and the hallmark symptoms of ADHD. And what's really going on is not necessarily all visible for us to really observe. And so what do you think happens when we're just seeing those symptoms on the surface? What happens? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Well, no. Well, there's a little bit of truth to that because you're suffering in the symptoms. And what happens, and what we know, is that our character gets sabotaged when we're just paying attention to what we see on the surface, right? And so a lot of times messages around, you just need to try harder. Why are you being so lazy, right? You've got this. I know you're smart enough. Why aren't you applying yourself? We hear a lot of things, or you must not really care. You're showing up late all the time. I know you don't care. And why aren't you listening to me? Am I not important enough to be heard, right? And so when we observe the things on the surface, and we're not really fully aware and understand what's going on below the surface, we can make misjudgments or have misunderstandings about what's really going on, and that's very harmful to someone. That just really makes them play small, feel stuck, and have a hard time breaking through and being who they are authentically to be successful in their life. But when you look below the surface, and what Chris Ziegler-Dendy points out is there's a lot more going on that we can't always easily observe. So that might be just the very neurobiological chemistry of the brain, neurotransmitter availability. It might be weak executive function skills that have not matured and fully developed that are causing daily mishaps going on in their life. It might be the impaired sense of time. It might be coexisting conditions like anxiety, depression, bipolar, all the things that can come along. It could be learning disabilities, right? It could be sleep challenges. Let's see if I got all of these. Low frustration tolerance, right? And sensitivity, just from going through life and experiencing that, so what happens, and the reason I love this, is because when you really get what's below the surface, you have more power to make a difference. You have the tools and approaches to target the things that are supporting someone's experience with ADHD for the better, right? So I'm gonna move on to executive function fundamentals. So we pay attention to 3 particular thought leaders quite a bit in the world of coaching. We pay attention to Russell Barkley, we pay attention to Dr. Thomas Brown, and we pay attention to Drs. Dawson and Geyer. And it's not that they are all that's out there, because executive functioning, the concepts around executive functioning have been around a lot. But what it does for us as coaches is it allows us to really start paying attention to executive functioning and how we can kind of bridge and build on some strategies and skills for them to show up the way they're wired to be more successful, right? And so they're all about self-regulation. It's all about self-regulation. And I just kind of skipped over my slide there. Dr. Thomas Brown talks about executive functioning as an orchestra conductor metaphor, and the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and how executive functioning, like the orchestra conductor's job, is to coordinate all that's going on, all those executive function skills for the person to think and plan and do and act as they intend to, right? And in the case of an orchestra, it's to make beautiful music, right? But in the case of human beings, it's to be able to function in a way that is successful for them and appropriate and on target with what they want to experience as goals in their life. Dr. Dawson and Geyer look at 11 different skills, and that'll be on a slide coming up. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That's my favorite. I know. I think you like Russell Barkley, right? You like to talk about. Mm-hmm. But it's all really about executive function, and it's all about our brain's ability to coordinate the things we think, do, and say. So here's Dr. Dawson and Geyer, two of them. These are the 11 skills we love. Now, they don't ever stand alone. You can't just tease out one over the other, because in everyday function, we're using a web of them or a mix of them in order to, to function, right? But you can probably recognize these. Working memory, Think of them as our mental sticky notes. So someone who struggles with working memory is going to misplace things. They're going to go somewhere and think, now why am I here? Or they're going to hear something and then within a couple of seconds it's gone because working memory wasn't able to capture it for long term or even short term, right? Planning and prioritization is another one. And planning and prioritization is our ability to take things that are more than one step, break them down, or take things and juggle responsibilities or tasks in a way that's effective for us. Being able to stay on task with what we need to do to achieve a goal. Organization could be systems, it could be, how we organize our stuff, it could be how we organize the flow of our day, it could be how we organize our thoughts in our head, it could be all about how we organize even our to-do list or our email and things like that. Time management, individuals with ADHD have a hard time following the pace of time. They can lose track of time, they can underestimate their time, they can overestimate their time. You might notice sometimes individuals with ADHD run late a lot, and they don't intend to. Sometimes they have to depend a lot on urgency to get things done, so they wait and they rush through things to get things done. Metacognition, thinking about thinking, so that's really that self-awareness about what's going on within us, what's going on around us. Response inhibition, not being impulsive. We might say something, blurt out something, interrupt, not meaning to, right? But it's just kind of that impulsivity is there. We might jump to conclusions. Response inhibition, emotional control. So, having ADHD is like being on an emotional roller coaster. It really is. And now even in adults, we're seeing things like rejection sensitivity dysphoria or what feels like trauma that they're having to deal with. So there's a whole lot more going on as we age through it if we don't deal with it effectively. And then sustained attention is being able to stay focused. With so much going around, we say what gets our attention gets our attention. So we can have all the intention in the world to pay attention, but we might notice someone moving around, or we might hear a sound, or we might even think of something in our head that takes us off track in another direction, right? Sometimes the flip side is getting caught up in hyperfocus there, and then task initiation, being able to get started. And once we get started, if we have to stop, being able to get started again, right? Goal-directed persistence is sticking with something. Sometimes we might have something that's very shiny or novel or high interest to us. And once maybe we work everything out and really get through the creative piece, we have a hard time doing the stuff that's more boring and tedious for us, right? And we get stuck. And then flexibility, could be flexible thinking, how we think about things. It could be adapting to change. So I like Dawson and Geyer myself because it really helps me see what's going on when I hear and work with clients in a way that I can kind of tease it out a little bit and for the point or for the purpose of working on strategies, right? And approaches that are better for them. So I'm sorry, there you go, Alicia.
Yeah, and so like Robin was saying, Dawson and Geyer are a great way to show the complexity of all the different things that you need to complete a task. And so with going on that, I love these pictures because something as simple as, I'm gonna say that in quotes, as, we'll just do the dishes, requires all this executive functioning that's working together. And so it's not that, it's not that they won't, a lot of times it's that they can't. So you can imagine if you have challenges with these executive functions, how that might be hard to move forward. And so there's these interplay with each other and can really bounce back and forth between all of these different pieces, which can make it really hard. So again, going back to this is how your brain is wired, is that these things are hard for your brain to do and hard to move forward. which can be really painful to hear too, of just do it. Because that internal thought is, why can't I? And really we want to emphasize, because your brain with ADHD has different wiring, so we are able to, when we're able to identify what exactly is going on, building that understanding and awareness is what's going to help shed light into what can we do to move forward? How can you move forward with this? And so with that, we want to just say that living well with ADHD is not just possible, but it is personal. Every story is really different. We take unique, individualized approaches to help people with ADHD brains to build systems that work with their brain. And so this journey can include support, it can include self-discovery, and really self-compassion. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, but there are a lot of proven tools and approaches that can be really beneficial to working with these executive function challenges. And so ADHD isn't something you fix. It is something you learn how to live with. Every journey looks different at every age, every stage, and that's okay. There are times in your life where you feel like you're managing it and it's coping, and something happens and different executive functions are really hard, or different ones pop up, or more of them than there have been before. And so, but with every stage brings new opportunities of growth, connection, and contribution. And so there can be times where there's more seasons. So maybe there's more emotional intensities, or I thought we just figured this out. And then something happens and you're shifting executive demands. And so there's more challenges, or there's more barriers that come up. So this kind of ebbs and flows, but the more you can understand your brain, the more it can empower you to figure out what to do and how to work with these pieces to move forward. And so coaching can really help build that clarity along with resilience and acceptance of, this is hard for my brain. How can I move forward? And so I'm going to leave that to Robin to show you the next steps.
Yeah, so multimodal support, we've thrown that around a little bit. And definitely coming at ADHD and all that can come along with it, it's really important to have a really good support team. You know, I think about my oldest son. He was in 5th grade, now 30. And we were on medication for him, and the dose kept getting higher and higher and higher. So we got to a point where we had to try something different. We discovered neurofeedback back then, and he did neurofeedback treatment, and he was, I'm a big believer, he was able to get off meds for 2 years, completely off meds. And he could have stayed off meds if he wanted to go back and do the neurofeedback. I'm 100% certain on that. But he was a hockey goalie, you know, so he was traveling all the time and busy in his life, so he kind of put that off. But it's really wonderful to have something like neurofeedback as part of your support program. And then there is the, you know, how do I, you know, maybe it's therapy they're getting, maybe they are still on some medication, maybe they need to work with an occupational therapist, right? There's all kinds of different professionals who really contribute to supporting ADHD, and finding the right mix for you makes a big difference. What we've found with ADHD coaching is it really allows us to take a lot of what others are working on with their ADHD and help them create the goals they want, and to have the support, accountability, and partnering in order to start applying new strategies, working on different skills that make a difference in their life. You know, we see a lot of clients who say, we've tried everything, nothing sticks, right? But then when they try coaching, it makes a big difference. And I'm not here just to sell the idea of coaching. I'm just trying to really weigh in on the fact that coming at ADHD from multiple approaches is a very, very important strategy. Okay, is this me too? I got it. Okay, so what is ADHD coaching? Well, I think I've kind of given a sense of it. And I'm gonna just go ahead and move on to the next slide for the essence of time. The World Health Organization says that ADHD coaching is a specialized form of life coaching where the coach is trained in ADHD. There is psychoeducation involved, there's psychosocial methodologies involved. It really helps the client learn about themselves, their diagnosis, and how it affects them and their function day to day. ADHD coaching is very solution focused, it's very strength based. So we're not broken, we're leaning into what our real strengths are. We're leaning into those traits that they have that have felt problematic and learning how to use them in a way that helps them, not necessarily hinder them, right? We're looking for strategies the way their brain thinks in order to find ways to be successful in school, in work, in life, in relationships, in managing a household day to day. It's very collaborative. So we follow the client's agenda. We follow the client's goal. We help them identify actions that will lead to their goal if they need help with that. And we support them in the journey of going after that. I like to say the tagline at the center is to encourage, empower, to enlighten. Actually, I got them mixed up, didn't I? Encourage, enlighten, empower, right? It's late. But I got it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is it's in your slides, but this is what we do. Understanding and awareness, self-discovery, leaning into strengths, figuring out the ways they're wired to win, building on life and executive function skills, exploring authentic approaches, one size does not fit all, helping them with goals and actions, and sometimes mindset. This is our crew. There are 12 of us at the center. We work with all ages, stages of individuals, all of us kind of specialize in different areas, all aspects of life. And that's you.
Yes. So one thing that we want to, again, highlight that having ADHD is not a limitation, but a different way that your brain works. And so by, again, understanding how ADHD really impacts what you do and why you do it, it can really help us learn how to live with ADHD. And coaching really opens that up. Like Robin said, it's more of how do you move forward, or I'm stuck, how do I get unstuck? And so unlocking that. And so with navigating that, one is an example of how I worked with parents. And when I first worked with the family, they were feeling really stuck with having struggles with routines and homework and transitions and following through with pieces. And so coaching with the parents helped them understand how he processed time and emotions differently. And with that clarity and practice individualized strategies, it helped them move forward and to be able to help his parents help him manage taking ownership of his tasks and asking for help when he needed and managing his emotions with better independence. And the parents felt more confident with communication improving as well with the strategy of moving forward.
Yeah. So I think we're wrapping up. And so if things came up and you have questions, please take a note of them. We will be here for questions afterwards. If you are interested in exploring the center's website, you'll find we have an awesome blog that once a week we send out amazing articles that are very helpful for someone with ADHD, and you can schedule a complimentary session with any of our coaches to explore coaching and explore what might feel right for next steps in that avenue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
If anybody wants to take a moment, grab a drink, potty break, a bite to eat, please do. We're just going to switch over and then we'll be up and running.
I think I accidentally
Thank
pressed
you.
a button.
Okay, I think we'll jump in, but again, if you want to go ahead and get something to eat, drink, whatever, you can feel free to move around as we chat. So thank you to our coaches for the presentation. This is a nice mix where we've got experts talking about ADHD from the behavioral level, and then we're really going to talk about it from the level of neurons. So for us, from our perspective, not that we, like obviously we take in behavior, we can see behavior, we hear about it, but our main focus, what we bring is that we take a look at what's happening at the level of the neuron, what's happening in the brain, and making changes there that can percolate up to behavior. So it's a great combination of kind of a top-down, bottom-up approach. So this is a slide we always show. This just talks about kind of who our mentors are. There's a lot of different kinds of neurofeedback, right? When somebody says neurofeedback, it's like saying pill, right? There's a lot of different kinds of pills that you can take. They're not the same. And one kind of pill maybe doesn't at all treat what you have. Same thing for neurofeedback. Many, many different kinds. So you want to know what kind of neurofeedback, what kind of equipment, what kind of software, what kind of training, because that makes all the difference to what you can anticipate in terms of outcomes. So we always like to kind of show our lineage, and that says something about how we practice. So one of the questions we always get, is there research on this? Absolutely. There are decades of research. There are tens of thousands of people who have dedicated their careers to it. There's a lot of research. Here's just a little bit of breakdown. If you wanted to look into some of the categories, you can see how much research there is in each area. So certainly enough if you wanted to try and knock off, say, 1%. If you wanted to read 1% of the literature, you'd be very busy. So tonight we're going to specifically talk about ADHD and our approach to treating ADHD. One of the things that is important to us and our mentor as we came in talked about. One of the things he said is if we just worked with the ADHD population, we would be doing an immense service to the community. And one of the reasons is even when an appropriate evaluation has been done, nationally it's about 35% of those are incorrect. In our clinic, we would say about 50% of a properly done ADHD assessment is incorrect. And so that's really important because if you're going to go down a path of treatment and you don't have ADHD, but they're either working with meds or behavioral modification, but the ADHD isn't the root of the problem, those are going to be unsuccessful paths for a person or not as successful. So we believe that bringing in the QEEG part that brings in another element of precision helps get us a little bit more dialed into what's going on in that brain. And we're going to take a look at some examples of these tonight. We're going to show you some of the classic biomarkers and then some of the things that aren't biomarkers. So one of the things that we strongly believe, so Fran and I are both clinicians for a lot of years, and we treated our clients without the benefit of neuroimaging. And then just for our own reasons, we ended up getting into neuroimaging and neurofeedback. And one of the things that we came to see was how much we had missed in our clients for decades by not being able to see what was going on in the brain. And so I like to use the example of you would not likely stay with your cardiologist if you went in for a heart checkup and your cardiologist asked you some questions, talked about your family history, and said, you're probably doing fine, and sent you on your way, right? In today's world, you would want them to do a calcium scan. Just image the heart, see what's blocked, see what's not blocked. Even doing a stress test is not a great option. You're looking at function, right? What's the behavior of the system, but you don't know specifically. When they image the heart, they can tell you what vessel has how much blockage, right? That's the cardiologist you want to be with. We feel it's the same way. Mental health is one of the only professions that doesn't image the organ they work on. And so our goal is to change that. So, part of what we do in our program is we bring in this idea of kind of precision evaluation. So we do the standard, we do behavioral, we do neurocognitive, but then we add to that QEEG. And so that's really what we're going to focus on tonight is the QEEG, the ERP, the neuroimaging side, because that's our point of distinction. The rest of it is very similar to what you would find in any other clinic for assessment. So our process, we kind of start with the brain mapping, so the QEEG, the ERP, then a report of findings where we go over the majority of the findings that came out of the report, what any one individual's brain is doing well, where is it challenged from a functional standpoint, and then into treatment. And so we call that, the QEEG is kind of a roadmap to treatment. It can give us insight into maybe what forms of like CBT, behavioral therapy might be helpful, what forms of talk therapy might be helpful, what medications might be helpful, and then on our side, the neuromodulation, what types of neuromodulation would we recommend? So you get a lot of information out of a QEEG that can help guide the choices that you'll make, even if it isn't about choices around neurotherapy. So here are some examples of the neuroimaging that we do. I don't think we have a larger version of this in the slideshow tonight, do we? Unfortunately, we don't have a bigger one for you. But when you guys had the cartoons up, I noticed that as they talked about the different functions, the different aspects of executive function, like working memory and attention, these are the brain networks that those functions emerge from. So when we're looking, we can see, is somebody's executive network compromised? Is their working memory network compromised? Is their dorsal or ventral attention networks compromised? How much, where, precisely how are they compromised? So as you guys were talking about the behavioral side of it, like, working memory doesn't seem to be going well for this person. Our side, we're looking at the neural roots of working memory and how is their working memory not functioning optimally for them. Many details that we get in terms of information around neuroimaging. So from the QEEG, we're looking at kind of the classic brain wave, right? So as neurons fire, they fire at a certain rate. As groups of or ensembles of neurons fire at a certain rate, it creates a brain wave, and that becomes a form of communication, much like the way your TV works or used to work when we had antennas, but now it comes in on a cable, so that's not a great example. Your radio, these are functioning on waves moving through the air, so very similar within our brain, right? We've got a local field potential where there's measurable waves moving around the brain. That's what we do with the QEEG. And we're looking at how powerful are those waves, like how strong are they, how much energy is in them, how fast are they moving? Are they moving as fast as they're supposed to be? Is the area that they're going to is the signal getting to where it's going to? Much like, again, in the old days, I'm going to use the TV as an example when we had antennas. And if your TV was off, the brainwave, the wave was coming, but there was no receiver there, right? You had to have the TV on for it to pick up that signal that was coming. So we're looking at both sides, transmission, but also reception. And is that communication happening the way it needs to be for optimal functioning? So here's just a little snippet of EEG and what we look at. Part of what we do is we'll take the EEG, we'll load it into 3 different artificial intelligences that will extrapolate data from it, but we'll also do a by-eye analysis of every minute of the EEG, looking for patterns that people are still better at finding than computers so far. So here's an example. So a lot of times, people say, and even people who work in the field, neurologists actually don't really think that brain waves do much, which is amazing to me that this is your profession and you think all this activity in the brain really doesn't do anything. But here's an example. This was done with 3 subjects where the person was looking at this symbol, and then they were taking EEG and then reading the EEG to pull out the symbol that was represented in the EEG. So you can tell, right? Like these are pretty accurate, right? That the computer could tell what letter they were looking at. You could reconstruct it, right? The imaging is good enough that you could be listening to music, and by reading the EEG, they can tell what music you're listening to, right? So the ability to extract actual data from EEG is incredibly powerful, right? So this idea that it's just kind of noise, it's an epiphenomenon, but it doesn't mean anything, absolutely incorrect. So part of what we do is, so we do the QEEG and we do the ERP. Do we have a, no, we don't. We use those to, ultimately, we want to try and identify the 8 biomarkers for ADHD if we're looking for ADHD. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things we will work with besides ADHD. It could be anxiety, depression, it could be bipolar, it could be traumatic brain injury, dementia, Parkinson's. Really, we say, anybody with a brain, that's our client. And we just look at that brain, see what's going on. Today, we're talking about ADHD specifically. So we have the 8 biomarkers that help us understand what type of ADHD does a person have, right? So the main category might be, do they or don't they? And then if yes, they do, which type? Because how you address that is completely different based on the phenotype. So here's just a quick kind of overview. When Fran steps up here, she's going to take you through in more detail what each one of these biomarkers is and what it's related to and how we treat it. So she's going to get a little bit more into the specifics of it. But we talked, our 2 coaches talked about executive function, right? So this is frontal lobe function. So a classic here with the mu rhythm is what's called frontal lobe disengagement. So somebody with a mu rhythm, when the brain is mewing, that's what we say, when the brain is mewing, what happens is it powers down the frontal lobe. So it could look like, and even an assessment could be, that somebody has diminished frontal lobe function. Question is why? Those frontal lobes might actually be completely healthy, doing everything they're supposed to, but they keep getting this signal from a different part of the brain to power down. So in that case, we don't really want to do anything with the frontal lobes. Even medicating the frontal lobes, trying to do exercises for the frontal lobes isn't going to help because it's in a different part of the brain that just happens to have a control over what's happening in the frontal lobes. So here's a piece that I wanted to talk about. So this was, you guys had mentioned ADHD in the family, so this is a family. These folks turned out, they had all, so a mom and 3 daughters, had all had a diagnosis of ADHD. When they came in and we did their Qs, not that they didn't have, some signs that I could see, we could fit those in, but that was not the big player for them. So what you see, like these really large spikes here, you can tell that they're much bigger, right, than the background activity, 10, 20, 30 times larger. So we would call that epileptiform activity. Right? So we don't get to say the word epilepsy, right? Only a neurologist can say the word epilepsy, right? In our profession, all you can say is epileptiform activity. And that's what all of them had, was just very large, massive epileptiform activity. Their work in psychotherapy, they're being on and off multiple medications, they're going through rounds and rounds of trying to address ADHD, set up in schools, special ed, all of that did essentially nothing for them because they have this. They have basically a non-tonic seizure. And so what would happen for them, talk about working memory, is every time their brain would throw off this big burst of theta, it was like their working memory was just wiped clean. So then they'd have to reconstruct everything that they were doing quickly and try and keep going, and then boom, it would get wiped clean again. What they really needed to do was be treated for epileptiform activity. But as collectively, individually, and as a family, they all said, no, we don't want that we don't like that. So they have continued on, their years past their time with us now, and they've continued down the path of trying therapy, trying medications, trying strategies and none of it working, right? And just a household of kind of chaos and dysfunction. But this, for us, is an example of that 50% that comes in with a properly assessed ADHD who doesn't. The number one thing we see is epileptiform activity, right? So you have a brain that is having, it could be something like absence seizures, right? They're very small, but very disruptive and are not going to respond to any of those treatments. So here's just another version of it where you kind of just see more of that activity. This is telling us that like their primary activity should be here at 10 hertz alpha, and their primary activity is down here at 5 hertz in theta. So again, this is not a brain that is doing what brains are supposed to be doing, and therefore we would not expect it to function that way in the world, right? Because it just at its base, it's not doing what brains are supposed to do. So this is just a little summary of kind of what we do. Fran, again, is going to talk a little bit in more detail. So we do, we do the QEEG, the neuroimaging. You're going to see an example of that here tonight. We do in-clinic neurofeedback, so operant conditioning. We do neurostimulation, so transcranial electrical stimulation or transcranial what's called photobiomodulation or light into the brain. We do at-home neuromodulation, at home, also photobiomodulation. So we have a program in clinic, at home. They're done. It's a great support to do both. In clinic, where we can be very precise, and at home, where it's general. But the nice thing is, at home, you can get it every day, and then in the clinic, it's just a couple times a week. Okay, Fran.
Okay, so I'm going to spend some time talking with you about those EEG profiles that Guy was mentioning, and really kind of looking, I'm not going to, bore you with all of the detail about what we see in terms of the specific brainwave activity, but to give you a general overview of how each profile can impact, and then more specifically, how what we do can really increase the brain's capacity or optimize it in ways to kind of address whatever that dysregulation is that's going on. So this first one is something called a frontal beta spindle. So the beta is a fast a brain wave, and this is a spindling of beta wave that happens regularly in the frontal lobe. This is most often associated with hypervigilance and with rumination. And so you can imagine, as you think about ADHD, that idea of kind of the brain that is ruminating, that kind of gets stuck and can't get off the thought to move to the next thing that has to happen or be paid attention to, that sort of thing. Or the hypervigilance, which has them kind of vigilant in the world, right? And so they're looking here, 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 here. That's what the brain is busy doing. And so the way that we can address this with neurotherapy is several ways. We can do what is called surface neurofeedback, which is where you just kind of train a couple of different sites. More often in our clinic, we do 19-channel neurofeedback, which allows us to train particular networks that might be dysregulated. So with frontal beta spindles, oftentimes the salience network plays a role. It gets in that kind of dysregulation, as well as the default mode network. And so those two, the salience network is every time you see somebody who has ADHD types of symptoms, almost always the salience network is going to be dysregulated. It's the network that allows, like it kind of mediates between internal attention and external attention. And so in any given moment, what's the salient piece of information or the salient stimuli for me to be paying attention to? Is it the stuff that's going on internally? Is it the stuff that's happening here? When the salience network isn't regulated well, it doesn't do that job well. And oftentimes that can lead to sort of a stuck brain or a brain that bounces around because the salience network can't figure out what to do with it. And so we might use 19-channel neurofeedback and literally train the salience network and regulate it so that it starts to behave or to perform more optimally. We might use neurostimulation. Sometimes in the clinic we'll start with some neurostimulation as a way to kind of prompt the brain, but it also can be a nice way to kind of start a particular frequency to kind of start producing more, to have the brain start producing more of that. In particular with frontal beta spindles, because we've got too much fast wave, we might do something like use a neurostim for a theta wave or something like that, right? And then we might also use audio-visual entrainment. And so Guy showed you a picture of the two little girls with the goggles and headset on. We have a bunch of them back here. You're welcome to try them out after we're done with the presentation. It's a device that works really well to entrain the brain to start kind of producing particular brainwave frequencies. And again, with this particular EEG profile, we're going to want to address that fast beta wave and try and get some other slower frequencies in to the brain. And so maybe an alpha protocol, we might do an SMR, that's a sensory motor rhythm, or maybe a low beta frequency. The bottom line here is the one I really want you guys to focus on, because when we do neurofeedback, this is what happens. When we do audio-visual entrainment, when we do neurostimulation, this is the possibilities. And these in the yellow down here line up. So when you presented, Robin, the whole list of symptoms, just this is what we do, is the brain can start to do those processes more optimally, can reduce rumination, can enhance a state of calm, it helps with executive functioning in a significant way, in particular with frontal beta spindling. When we train like the salience network, it can really help with the executive functioning process that kind of gets hijacked with this kind of a profile. And then we have a couple other profiles up here. One is excess theta waves. So theta is a slow wave, or a high theta to beta ratio, meaning too much theta, not enough beta, basically. And again, we can go and talk about the different kinds of processes that we can, or treatments that we can use to address these. When somebody has excess theta or a high theta beta ratio, oftentimes what's happening in the brain is really a critical sense of a state of under-arousal. And so we want to give it some fast brainwave activity. And so we might, with some neurostimulation, do something like give it a higher, like an alpha wave or maybe even a beta wave that we might consider doing that with. When there's excess theta, oftentimes it impacts working memory, the working memory network, and both Robin and Alicia talked about how much that plays a role in ADHD and the struggle with that. And so we can train 19-channel neurofeedback can train that working memory to regulate so that it can start performing the functions that it is meant to be able to do. And then so oftentimes with excess theta, the executive functioning just is not working, and so we might train the executive network as well. Almost everybody who has a profile of ADHD or even any symptoms reported of ADHD, we're going to highly recommend that in addition to the in-clinic services that they utilize the audio-visual entrainment device, because it's got a whole category of protocols that are meant to help with calm focus and to brighten the brain, basically to really allow the brain to optimize in terms of its cognitive processing. And then there's the Mu rhythm that Guy talked about. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk with you about a particular client, and we're going to come back to the Mu rhythm here. The thing to keep in mind here is that with Mu rhythm, there's that central slowing or that frontal lobe disengagement. When people talk to me about this, the thing that I hear over and over and over again, mostly from adults, but sometimes kids can verbalize it this way, is they'll say to me, you know, I can be listening to somebody talk and I'm following them and catching everything they say, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, what did they just say? And it's almost like my brain went offline and came back online really quickly, but it does that frequently. That's mu rhythm disengaging the frontal lobe. And so again, this shows you there are a lot of different options we can use with neurotherapy to treat this kind of dysregulation in the brain and have pretty significant success with it. And when we do, we see people who are better able to hold sustained attention. Oftentimes it can improve social cognition as well, which is a thing that can happen with dysregulated mu wave. The kind of calm focus, reduced impulsivity is significant with when we use neurofeedback or audiovisual entrainment to address this particular frequency or dysregulation. Then there's excess delta. Delta is really slow brainwave. It's the brainwave that most of us hope to have when we've got our heads on the pillow, right? And if you don't, check out the audiovisual entrainment. It's a great tool for that. Excess delta is going to be really deep cortical sluggishness. So this is going to look like, kind of on the outside, like sluggish thought processes, kind of just slow to, like the brain is slow to pick up on things. And so it can affect attention, it can affect memory, it can affect, you see it affect relationships an awful lot because the person appears to not be paying attention. And it's just that, you know, there's sluggishness there and the brain isn't optimizing what it should be. And again, lots of things that we could do with neurotherapies to address this. We might look at the default mode. We might look at the alertness network. We might look at the salience network. We're going to train those if the EEG that Guy was talking about shows that there's dysregulation in there. We're not just going to guess based on symptoms and say, you seem like you have a sluggish cognitive processing. Let's train your salience network. We're going to look, see where the dysregulation is, and then train it. And then slowed alpha, again, this is kind of a sluggish cognitive processing speed that we see here. People's peak alpha frequency in adults is 10 hertz. And so when that is slow, it has this tendency to kind of create this sluggishness. It also can sometimes create a sense of hypervigilance in some individuals. And so again, maybe we're going to look at, if somebody's got a slow peak alpha frequency, we're likely going to look at doing some neurostimulation that can really start to optimize the amount of alpha that they are producing in the brain. And so the neurostimulation will help to kind of jumpstart that process. And again, you can see in the yellow all of the benefits that can come from that. Improved memory, problem solving, decision making, all of those executive function processes that were mentioned. The other really significant executive function piece is emotion regulation. And so when the executive functioning is not working properly because of brain dysregulation, oftentimes you see people that just have difficulty regulating emotion. So we see this a lot in kids when they come in, right? And it's been an issue and they're having trouble in school because of it, that sort of thing. I think a lot of times by the time an adult who has had ADHD for a while but has been living with it, by the time they get in, they've either kind of, the brain has learned how to compensate and kind of mask that a bit, or they've just learned how to kind of mask it on their own. And so they kind of live with it internally and struggle with it without a lot of people knowing. And then there's excess frontal alpha that can happen. So when that happens, oftentimes it's like there's no cognitive braking. And so this oftentimes, again, can have an impact on executive functioning, working memory. It can impact the way vigilance, like the attention somebody has in the world. And so, again, we could choose a modality or a combination of modalities for neurotherapy to address these and have the positive impacts that you see on the screen, the alertness, the active concentration, being able to have a faster processing speed, which is going to allow all of those cognitive processes to just work much smoother. It really is all about kind of optimizing the brain so that all of the skills that like Robin and Alicia were talking about that they do as coaches can be successful, right? Because the brain is optimized in a way that will allow the person to be much better able to have success in applying the skills. It's rare that somebody, I'm guessing for you guys, it's rare that somebody comes to you who hasn't been trying really hard to make it work and just cannot do it. And oftentimes that's because there's this dysregulation that is getting in the way of them being able to engage in the skills that they're trying to develop. So this example, Alex, is a 10-year-old boy who came to us. He was diagnosed as ADHD. He's twice gifted, tested as twice gifted, had significant focus issues and emotion regulation issues, and they were impacting both his school life and his home life, right? He would have big emotional outbursts because he couldn't control his emotions when he got upset because he couldn't get the work done that he knew he had capacity to do, but just couldn't seem to get his schoolwork done, get his projects done, that sort of thing. So when we did the QEEG, one of the primary findings, certainly not the only one, but one of them was that he had a mu rhythm. So you can see that right here, this classic, they refer to it as owl eyes, right? That he had showing up in, his is in the 11 to 13 hertz range, which is a commonplace range for mu rhythm to show up. And so a lot of what was happening for Alex was he was having this frontal lobe disengagement that was making it difficult for him to pretty much engage in any of the activities that he really wanted to do and feel successful in them, right? So here's what we did with Alex. We started with 5 neurostimulation sessions. We did an alpha protocol. He also had a pretty low peak alpha frequency. On session 6, we transferred over to neurofeedback, and it's typical for us to look at, you know, that map Guy showed you of all the brain networks when we were looking at the QEEG. We can do what we call a tour of networks, which is basically we look at all the dysregulated, like low efficiency networks, and we see which ones of those are the most dysregulated. We can tell the number of metrics, we can tell how many standard deviations away from the norm they are, and then we start with the most dysregulated networks and we start training those. So on sessions 7 through 29, we did a lot of work on training Alex's salience network. It was as low as it could be on the scale of efficiency, and so we spent a lot of time training that, and then we did sessions 30 through 40 training the default mode network, which also showed as low efficiency. You saw when I was showing you the EEG profiles that those networks show up, right, as kind of common with ADHD. So on the right, what you see is just a brief list of the improvements that Alex's mom reported, but Alex did as well, which is phenomenal when you have a 10-year-old kid who, you know, 40 sessions into treatment is saying, I see all of this improvement, I feel better, I'm happier, that sort of thing. So it improved his sleep. He had had some issues with sleep, and so it improved his sleep, increased independent task initiation, which was one of the things on your list, right, and follow through, enhanced his self-regulation. So he went from having those big emotional outbursts to being able to manage his emotions and actually talk about managing his emotions before he actually engaged in managing his emotions. He was engaging more in conversation with family. This was huge. Alex's dysregulation, the sweetest kid in the world, just like you can't not fall in love with him when you talk with him. But his dysregulation was having a pretty significant impact on the family because he would get so upset about his failures in school, and then it would just be, you know, nothing but emotional outburst when he was at home, and because he couldn't regulate it, that made it more challenging. Enjoying time with family and friends, transitions were much better between doing things. So this is that piece about flexibility that you were talking about, Robin, too. That idea of being able to transition from one thing to another smoothly without it completely throwing you off base or getting you completely emotionally dysregulated. And he has reportedly has more patience with his younger brother, which had also been a significant issue here. And so this, when Mom kind of wrote to us about the changes that they had been seeing, probably the thing that stood out for us the most was that one of the things she said is that while all of these things they noticed, right, the improvement here, what was really standing out for them was that they were no longer getting reports from school. It was like silence from school, like what happened, right? And that's because he was able to do what he needed to do in school. He did this big project with PowerPoint and all of this and did it all on his own, really successful. But for the parents, that lack of communication from the school was seen as just like that was the winning piece here, right? Really kind of solidified what they had been seeing. Okay, so we are going to transition now into actually looking at how neurofeedback works. So we're going to do a demonstration. So what is your first name? Amy has volunteered to be our little guinea pig here, and so in a moment Adam's going to show up on the screen. I think we'll start by seeing Amy's brain. We'll look at the EEG and we'll talk a little bit about kind of that, and then we'll have her engage in a little bit of neurofeedback so you can get a sense of what happens with that. When people do, Guy talked about neurofeedback and that it is an operant conditioning approach. And so once Amy starts doing neurofeedback, you're going to see that happening, that we're actually training her brain through a process of operant conditioning to behave differently. And what behave differently means in brain terms is to have, to create or start building different neural circuitry. Neural circuitry that's going to be more optimal in terms of its functioning. And then over the process of time, so an average number of sessions for neurofeedback is 40 sessions. So over the process of those 40 sessions and the repetition that happens, those new neural circuits become much more sort of well-rutted, if you will, and the old ones that aren't getting used anymore start to fade away, and eventually we know neurons, when they're not used, they slough off, right? They fall away. And so that's kind of what we're going to see in terms of the neurofeedback process when we get it up and going. There's inevitably one place where there's a little technical glitch happening, and I was smug in the beginning because we actually were able to start on time because our technology all worked. Darn, I shouldn't have said anything, right? The other things that we do in the clinic, I'll just talk with you a little bit about the other interventions and say a little bit more about them. So we do neurostimulation. I've talked about that. There's a difference between neurofeedback and neurostimulation in terms of its type of treatment. Neurofeedback is a learning paradigm. We're literally teaching your brain to behave differently. Neurostimulation is a treatment paradigm. So we might stimulate the brain with some electrical stimulation as a way to kind of get the brain, kind of cajole the brain into starting to produce whatever frequency we're stimulating it with. And so oftentimes we'll use that in the clinic either as a treatment, like I was talking about the peak alpha frequency with Alex, and so we might specifically just do that. But sometimes we'll do it as a way to just kind of prime the brain to kind of get started, because the work of neural feedback is very, I mean, it's hard work. It's like training at the gym. The brain can get pretty busy.
Adam, probably you hit mute.
Oh, am I safe to talk? Nope. I'm sure there's some people in the room here that are would probably think we don't need to hear Fran say things twice, really. Once is good plenty. I'm super excited to talk with you about Amy's brain.
Okay, so I'm just,
It's going to keep echoing.
yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and share. Just, all right, so that, I think that's got it.
Okay.
So,
Are you good?
yep.
Oh, perfect. All right. Nice work. So what you're seeing up on the screen here right now is actually Amy's brain waves. So each one of the lines there is, is one of the sensors on the cap that you see her wearing there. And so when we're looking at this, so there's all kinds of things you can see. There's eye blink here. There looks like there's some jaw tension that Amy has going on there. And part of that is that she's smiling, she's fascinated, she's, those kinds of things. But we can tell here because you can see that it looks different. So when we're training somebody, we are always watching their EEG in real time so that we can see what's happening. What you see over here is something that we call head maps. You can see the different brainwave frequencies, delta, theta, alpha, beta, high beta. Gamma doesn't show up on this one, but oftentimes we're looking at gamma as well. And so this is part of what we look. We'll show you the rest of what we see on the technician side of things as somebody's doing a training. Do you want to go ahead and... Okay, so Amy, there I go again. Your job is to just kind of watch, once this plane gets flying, to just watch. You can do one of two things. You're going to see this bar down there that you can watch, or there'll be a target on the screen that you can watch. The idea is to not deviate your eyes a lot. Don't look around a lot, okay? And we're going to let your brain fly an airplane for a while, play a video game, okay? So go ahead, go ahead and start it up, Adam. So off she goes.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Yep.
Look at that target.
Oh. Imagine a target. Yep, the green. Yep. Yep, so the one that's out farther, not this one. And so what Amy would do while she's in a neurofeedback session is she would do exactly what she's doing in here, which is to sit in a kind of relaxed state and focus. It's almost like we always tell our clients, like, you are your brain's best friend, and your brain's playing a video game, so hang out with your brain and cheer it on, right? And so as she's doing this, what's actually happening is we're reading her EEG. That's what the cap here is for. It's getting fed into a database of kind of neuro-optimal brains. And whenever the database notices her brain behaving a little bit like the database, like the optimal brain, it's going to reward the brain, and the reward is it's going to tell the computer program to have the flying object go through the target. When it goes through the target, it flips over, so there's a visual stimulus, and it makes a swishing sound, so there's an auditory stimulus, and when that happens, that stimuli is rewarding for the brain. So we're not talking about training Amy's mind, because Amy might not find flipping planes really particularly enjoyable, but her brain likes stimuli. Brains like stimuli, and so when they get it, they're more likely to do it again. That's the operant conditioning piece. And so she would sit there for 40 minutes doing this kind of training. Meanwhile, Adam, as a technician, is busy watching her EEG, watching the head maps, watching the information here. So there are several things. Adam, can you pull this one up just a little bit more? Thank you. And then will you move it so we can see metrics? Switch the tab. Yeah, thank you. So what you can see here is, I don't know what network we're training. Salience, perfect. And what we can see here is it's showing 566 individual metrics of dysregulation in the salience network. It's a lot of metrics to be dysregulated. And then this is showing us information about Brodmann areas that are part of the network that is dysregulated. This is kind of the frequencies that are in this dysregulation. And then you want to flip it back, Adam. Thank you. And then here you can see this red line, that's the training threshold. So Adam has set the training at a level that is supposed to be like allow Amy to be successful, to get some rewards, but not 100% rewards, because brain does not learn if it never gets challenged, right? And so he's got this set at 4 standard deviations above the norm. These are the 566 metrics that we saw on the other tab, and this is what he's training. And so as we go through the training, the idea is that the brain starts to regulate at 4 standard deviations, and then at some point Adam's going to bump it down maybe to 3.75 or something like that. And then the brain's going to have to work harder again, and it's not going to be as successful at first, but it's going to learn through this process how to stay more regulated. And then the goal is that we just kind of keep working to regulate that particular network as Amy sits and watches the plane fly through the hoop.
Am I supposed to be looking at the first circle or the second?
Look at that one. This, I would suggest looking at the bar. I'm more of a bar fan. Looking at the bars, sure. Over here, these head maps can tell us which frequencies might have some particular dysregulation happening as we're training. So as you see the map here, anything green is sort of the neuro-optimal or neurotypical. Anything that's in the cooler colors, like the blues, is deficiency, so not enough of that frequency happening in the brain while we're in this network. And then anything that's in the yellow or red colors is excess that we might see. And so right now, like, we see a little bit of excess showing up in beta and high beta for Amy. Some of this is likely just eye movement stuff. And I just saw you yawn, and so there was probably some muscle artifact going. What's it like to do this?
Well, I kind of have dry eyes, so it's like I'm trying to focus and not blink, and then when I blink, I see it move. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, am I doing it right? Am I looking at the first circle or the second one? And then you said the bar, so.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a wonderful description of what happens in a neurofeedback session, right? Are those kinds of things actually do happen, right? And then the mind gets involved. You say, am I doing it right, right? Immediately the mind starts to get involved. And so there's a process of helping people learn how to kind of let that go, stay relaxed, and and including your eyes, because people have a tendency to stare at the screen, right? And just to kind of go with that process, yeah. Anything,
We have biofeedback connected.
oh, you do? Okay. So, you want to talk about this? This is your fave.
Yep. And we're close at time, so. Yep. Okay.
Can I just quick ask, so would someone for 40 minutes watch a stream?
Yeah, we take breaks in between, so maybe do start with 5-minute rounds when you first start training. And then you train for 5, we take a break for a minute or 2, then do another 5 minutes, that kind of thing. And then we start making the rounds longer, but it's not usual that somebody would train straight 40 minutes through without a break. I'm not saying that wouldn't happen, but that's not the norm probably. Yep.
Okay, so biofeedback or biometrics, if they're not training on it, we're just collecting biometrics. So these are sensors she has on her hands, a respiration belt, so that we're picking up heart rate, blood volume, pulse, so how much blood is moving through the arteries, peripheral temperature, and then the breathing pace. So like we say, we're looking at the central nervous system or the brain, right, with the CAP, with the EEG, and we're looking at the autonomic nervous system with the biometrics. And so we're kind of looking at what's the body doing, what's the brain doing, and of course those two systems are intimately related. So it's entirely possible that a person could have dysregulation that's showing up in their brain that is really coming from dysregulation in the body. So we would want to train what's happening in the body, train the autonomic nervous system, so that helps to regulate what's happening in the brain or remove some information that is ultimately dysregulating to the brain, right? So we're taking away a source of dysregulation. So let's see. So right now it looks like kind of you're breathing in around 14 breaths per minute. So I just wondering if you go ahead and breathe a little bit slower. So to see if you can hit a pace that brings that maybe down more like to about a 6 breaths per minute. So like a 5-second inhale and a 5-second exhale. Okay? And then as that happens, we might see some of these metrics here start to change. But often when we're doing training, we're doing neurofeedback training, we have somebody connected to this, so we're monitoring what's happening in their autonomic nervous system. And then if we see challenges there, we might switch them from neurofeedback to biofeedback so that they could train their autonomic nervous system and then go back into training neurofeedback. Right? So I'm a fan of the biofeed, the biometrics, and in particular heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is our best predictor of all-cause mortality. So it's basically like how well your autonomic nervous system is functioning is a predictor of your health. So how do you do in terms of health over the long haul? The higher your heart rate variability, the better your health. The lower your heart rate variability, the poorer your health is. So it's an important metric overall. So even when people come through, they could be coming through related to ADHD or a traumatic brain injury or anxiety. We're going to be looking at that metric and having that as a core understanding that it potentially serves what they're in for, but it also serves them as a person over the course of their lifetime. So important information that comes from here. So I would pause there. Yep. So we can now open up for questions. So if you have questions for any of the 4 of us, this is a great time. Newbridge, sure.
I think they might have had 19 channels. Yeah, I think the 19 channels been around.
Yep. Oh yeah, 19 channels been around for a long time.
Okay. But this combining 2 things I have. Combining the biofeedback is interesting too. So is that just like an upgrade of your firmware that allows you to do that, or did the original 19 channel have that as well?
No, I mean they're separate devices, separate software, separate everything. Just a decision that we made as a clinic when we started was we didn't want to specialize in 1 channel or 2 channel or 4 channel or 10 channel or 19 channel. We didn't want to specialize in surface EEG or Loretta. We wanted to be able to do all of it. So we bought all the equipment and all the software and did all the training. That's the difference and why we have so many options.
And then the other thing is, once you've gone through the course of training, do people need to, come back for a refresher, or how long does that last once you've changed the neural pathways?
Sure. So in general, as a profession, we hold it as its permanence. When you do neurofeedback, it's a learning paradigm. So it's just like learning any skill. Once it's wired in, right? The example I like to use is driving. You took driving lessons once, and hopefully you're a better driver now than you were then. And you're better because you just do it all the time. So same thing, when we introduce a new optimized circuit to the brain will just choose to use that circuit because it gets it better results in the world, right? And so it'll just choose to use that and keep wiring it in and wiring it in and wiring it in. And while it's wiring in that new circuit, it'll be pruning the old one over time. So we really make the base assumption that if a person goes through a full course of neurotherapy, where they end at the end, that's permanent. Yeah.
And I don't know if you can speak on this, it's a little bit out of context for tonight's presentation, but I noticed you meant autism spectrum disorder. And what kind of results, maybe in a two-sentence statement, have you seen, have you had a lot of clients with? I'm speaking of one person I family that has mild autism, so they used to call it autism.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fran, do you want to?
Yeah, we work with,
Turn it off. Okay.
we do work with a lot of people kind of on the spectrum of autism, right? So a lot of people who have mild, like would have been Asperger's, some diagnosed, some not, but obvious, and it's obvious to them as well. And then we've also worked with people that are really on the severe end, and so what we do with them is very different than what we might do with neurofeedback here. And your question is about how successful we are with them. Yeah. So part of that depends on what they're coming in with, right? If we've got somebody who's nonverbal, we're not going to make them verbal, right? But what we might be able to do is to help them get better at regulating emotion, maybe calming down the stimming a bit, that kind of thing. And then on kind of the other end of the spectrum, we have like the same kind of results that we have with most anybody who comes in to do training with us, and we have a pretty high success rate with that. And success, people get to define their own level of success. We can talk about it in terms of what we see objectively with the regulation of the brain. They get to talk about what they want success to look like, and I would say we have a pretty high success rate. Yep.
And have you ever done like some sort of, I don't know if you want to call it study, just kind of encapsulating, obviously anonymous, what
Yeah.
to measure that?
Yeah, we do not have that kind of written data that where we've done that kind of thing, but we have, like, what we do know is number of clients we've treated and this, how many have gone. For us, I think success tends to be somebody comes in with a certain goal and they leave either reaching that goal or well on their way to that goal, right? That sort of thing. Yeah. Yep. Other questions? Maybe some for Robin or Alicia. Anybody? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. Oh, yep.
Talking about ADHD, pros and cons, what is the benefit someone with ADHD has? Like, the benefit that a person without ADHD does not have?
That is a complicated question. And so, I don't know, I can speak or do you want to? Okay. And so with ADHD, there's different things that happen that it depends on how the person would utilize it. So really, I would emphasize that the person uniquely has their own strengths, but different things like hyperfocus, if you are able to utilize and encapsulate that in a positive way, that can be really beneficial. For example,
booting up and making sure that we're ready for a presentation and being able to sit and work on that for hours on end can be a benefit. So really it's about how do you utilize those differences in your brain to make it beneficial for what you're working for. Does that help clarify? Yeah, so how do you utilize it to work with your brain to help with those pieces?
Can I add some? Yes. We use VIA character strengths a lot to work with our clients. You can go onto their site, viacharacter.org, and take that. And one of the traits that we often see in the top 5 to 7 character strengths is curiosity and creativity. And so almost consistently, sometimes one of them is dropped a little lower, but out of these different traits, those tend to shine. And so when you're talking about you have a strength and you can either use it to help yourself or you can use it to hinder yourself, part of it is just being aware of this is my strength and how can I apply it? How can I create that curiosity to stand out like a superpower in whatever I'm doing and in however I'm contributing in a way that really gives me wings with ADHD, right? And same with curiosity. Some individuals with ADHD think on their feet very quickly. So you'll see a lot of physicians actually in emergency room settings and such who also have ADHD because they have that superpower, that talent to do that particular thing. So there's a lot of traits. We have a long list of them that commonly we see show up in our clients where when they are really leaning into their strengths and into those traits and understand how they use it, not overuse it, not underuse it, but use it just right, it makes a big difference for them.
Yeah, so especially Robin's example, so that curiosity. We can use the curiosity to go off on different brain tangents when we're listening to different things, or we can use the curiosity to help us stay focused on things that are boring and utilizing that questioning brain to help us stay focused.
Is part of that ED, the features of it, say, is seeing the big picture, like being able to see the big picture and how all the big pieces fit together?
Yeah.
Kind of explains, I don't know if this is a thing that I feel like it's with dyslexia a lot, like 60% of entrepreneurs or something are either dyslexic or ADHD. I can't remember.
There's a high percentage of us. Very, very good in the area of ideation. They can make connections so fast about what people are thinking about that others can't even, they can't come up with, right? And so that's a real gift for them too. Big picture thinking, out of the box thinking. Individuals with ADHD often have a lot of perseverance because they get knocked down and they have to get back up again, right, in their life. And so you see some of them are very determined and very perseverant. There's a lot of wonderful traits with ADHD.
So when it comes to like motivation, I'm seeing it in my ADHD child, it's lacking. So, and as I'm becoming more aware of dopamine, it's a factor in motivation. So how does this brain training affect the dopamine levels at all?
Great question. So the question was about dopamine, just for the folks who are listening online. And so yes, we could take a network perspective. So when we get that image up on the screen that kind of showed all the common networks, one of them is the reward network. And reward network is going to be skewed towards dopamine and how it flows in the brain and what is considered a reward. And so there's rewiring that can be done within the reward network, which includes dopamine as a central part of it, but it isn't just limited to that. So that's one piece. But then also we can dial into, we don't have to stay at a network level, we can dial into some very specific regions, and then we could be able to work with the dopamine system in that way as well. And then that's neurofeedback. We also have neurostimulation, and neurostimulation allows us another way of addressing the brain. So it isn't from a learning paradigm, operant conditioning. It's a little bit more just kind of pushing the brain around and getting it to do what we want. And so that's another way that we can address that.
So it sounds like when you're doing the mapping, if I'm understanding it correctly, you can actually see, oh, this particular network would be indicative of low dopamine. Am I saying that right? Or how do you?
We don't really think so much in terms of dopamine, right? Because that's a neurotransmitter. We don't see neurotransmitters, but we can look at wiring, and we could see how are the reward centers connected with, say, the frontal lobe or with the anterior posterior cingulate, which is self-regulation. And so we get a map of the pathways that are, being most used. And that's what we would change, is the pathways. How do we have those pathways run in a neurooptimal way instead of a suboptimal way?
Because you could see that this particular pathway would not be allowing, or would not be contributing towards the reward system. Am I saying that right?
It could be that, or it would be more like, this is how the reward system is working, like here it is, but it isn't wired up the way we'd want. So one of my favorite examples, light switch over there, you turn it on and the lights come on. But it could be rewired so you could turn it on and the outlet over there turned off, right? Like the switch is wired just to the wrong thing for not what you want. That's what we see. And we go like, oh, what we want to do is take the wires from that switch and run it to the lights. So when you turn it on, the lights come on. And we don't want the switch wired backwards so that when you flip it up, the lights go off, because that's just confusing for people. So that's what we're dealing with. Yep. Yep. Okay. Looks like wonderful. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your patience. Please grab a snack on the way out. Take a cashew or a sandwich, something. Otherwise, Adam has to eat it all. So he appreciates your help.